Late Sunday night and tonight after football, I am talking Oscar power rankings in honor of Best Director. Reason I decided to talk about Best Director this week, it's because Francis Ford Coppola just had Megalopolis, so it felt right to talk about directing category for the Oscars. I have 21 names that I want to talk about today. I have them broken down into different categories. The idea of this power rankings is just to kind of get a state of the race. Obviously, this is just my opinion, and I hope that I don't annoy anyone. I am sure I will. Let me know in the comments below where I am wrong. So ranking these directors, I have 21 that I wanted to talk about today. Let's do the first category, which I call mistakes were made. And I have 5 people in this category, and I essentially am going to declare the time of death for their Oscar chances at Best Director. Let's go with 21. This is Kevin Costner for Horizon Chapter 1. The rationale that I had originally in this Oscar season when I started thinking about predictions a few months ago was Kevin Costner made Dances with Wolves. What if he pulls off this Western and it is truly one of the American greats? So I was using that rationale of Dances with Wolves. The exact moment I think it was safe to say this movie had no chance at Oscar acclaim was when the movie ends with a montage for the next movie. And you're like, oh, okay, this is just a TV show. That's when I knew this thing was out, even though I liked the movie. Number 20, George Miller, Furiosa. Rationale, Mad Max Fury Road. Look at what that movie did. When I knew this movie had lost all chances, it was when I first noticed the clear CGI use in the movie, which again, I liked Furiosa quite a bit, but I believed the whole time that Furiosa had to, at the very least, be of equal to Fury Road and most likely surpass Fury Road significantly. And I think that use of CGI, I noticed a lot of criticism towards it. It pissed off a lot of people, knew its chances were dead at that moment. Number 19, Todd Phillips, Joker, Folie, Deux. Rationale, again, Joker. 2019, we saw what he did with Joker. What if this movie's better? There's inherent risk to this due to the musical genre of this. So that was my logic where I'm like, okay, let's just take the first movie and actually add some risk to it with a musical element. What if we can pull off a good musical? When the Venice reception came out, I was like, oh, okay, I think it's safe to cross this one off the list. Number 18, Alex Garland, Civil War. Rationale for this movie, it's the best movie thus far this year. I wholeheartedly believe that. I think it's the best movie made in 2024 thus far. Still haven't seen a lot, but of the 100 movies I've seen thus far, it's my favorite. The apolitical discourse of this movie really just stunted this movie's chance at going to further acclaim. This movie's just too divisive. Coming in at number 17, Francis Ford Coppola, Megalopolis. When I knew this movie was doomed is when I was sitting in the screening about a week ago, and they had the whole person comes out on the stage to like deliver a line, but he lip synced it. It didn't work. It felt just weird. That's when I knew. I'm like, uh-oh, this movie's not really going to get any nominations. Here's the one thing that kind of kept even before the movie had started. There was a Q&A, and the way Spike Lee talked about this movie, I'm like, oh, are directors or people in Hollywood really going to respond to the risk that Francis Ford Coppola does? So I kind of think 17 might be too low. However, seeing the quality of the movie, I don't know how much of a fan base this movie is going to get. Next category I have yes, comma, but. Yes, but. Whole idea of this category is there is solid reason to think that these people are deserving of nominations. However, there's a but to it, and we're going to talk about those buts. So, coming in at number 16, Robert Zemeckis here. What's the but? Because this movie makes sense. Reuniting with the team from Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, intimate story, movie that looks heartfelt, emotional. There's a lot to like about a classic studio releasing it. I believe it's Sony. And the rationale is there's a lot to believe in here. Here's what's hard to believe, though. Zemeckis has only made like 2 or 3 good movies this century. There's Castaway, and then there's Flight in 2012. And then I will contend The Walk is decent. After that, I can't say that there's much left. So that's where I'm a little like, that's the but, where it's just like, is Zemeckis really making good films anymore? Coming in at number 15, and apologies, I forgot how to pronounce the woman's name, Coraline Farge, for The Substance. And this movie is really good. I reviewed this movie a few weeks ago. There is so much to like about it. Coraline's direction in this movie is superb. What the movie does in its final 30 minutes is just so bonkers and fun. And I also think that is going to be, I would, here, without spoiling The Substance, I believe if you just got rid of the last 30 minutes, the movie's not as much fun for me. However, I think there'd be a higher chance to get an Academy Award nomination. I think for the first, it's a 2-hour and 20-minute movie. I think for the first 2 hours, it's a little disgusting in scenes, but it is really a social satire that has a lot of dark undertones that I think the Academy could respond to, anchored with this incredible performance in Demi Moore. Where the film goes in the last 20 to 30 minutes is just so shocking and spectacle that I just don't think the Academy is ready for this type of movie. I'd love it if Coraline got in for The Substance. I just don't think it's likely. Number 14, Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. The butt of this, besides the fact that none of us have seen this movie, Nosferatu, is Eggers going to make a movie too weird and genre-focused, which is kind of Eggers' thing. It's what I love about him. I think it's why The Northman is awesome. I think it's why The Lighthouse is great. But sometimes his movies just go really off-kilter, and it's not always great for buying in. Now, everything that I've seen of this movie so far, it looks like it's the real deal. Coming in at 13, Luca Guadagnino for Queer. And I think the big but for this is Queer going to be Luca's second best film of the year? He's now competing with himself. He has challengers, and it doesn't seem like challengers is in the race. However, it seems that people may enjoy challengers more than they enjoyed Queer. And I think that's not working in the film's favor. So that's a question worth exploring and asking. And I think it might be the thing that derails Luca's, essentially, this film's too divisive. And he has another film from earlier this year that people are more positive on. Coming in at number 12, I have James Mangold for A Complete Unknown. What's the but for this one? It's a pretty standard biopic movie. Like, there's a lot in this film's favor. The but is, what if this is a film solely focused around getting Timothée Chalamet the win? What if the team at, I believe it's Searchlight Pictures, that's their concern with this movie? Hey, we want to get Timothée Chalamet. We want to anoint him. We want to get him his Oscar. That's all the focus, all the attention, everything that we're talking about, we're solely directing it on Chalamet, and we don't really care about the rest of the nominations. I think that's a possibility. I think essentially, like, I guess the question is, could this do a Baz Luhrmann Elvis type thing where Elvis really does become a sensation and get a Best Picture? I think Elvis doesn't have I think Elvis has the breakthrough status that I just don't know if A Complete Unknown will have. I don't see A Complete Unknown making bonzo money at the box office. I just don't think that's likely. And I think if that's not the case, I don't think you're going to see a Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't think you're going to see an Elvis type nominations that are sweeping. I think Chalamet could be really safe for a Best Actor nomination, but that might really be all you're focusing on. Number 11, Gladiator II, Ridley Scott. There's a huge but for this. Gladiator is beloved. First film of the century to win Best Picture. Shockingly, Scott, despite getting the acclaim and getting the Best Picture, doesn't get Best Director. He's never won Best Director. And the fear with a sequel is, if this film is even good, like if Gladiator 2 is good, but it's just not as good as the first film, I don't think the film gets in for nominations for Best Director. Here's the other side, though, and this is my big, bold prediction. If Gladiator II is really good to great, and it does break through, and it does get the Oscar nomination, Ridley Scott is the front runner to win. No stop. 100%. If he gets the nomination, he's winning it. Christopher Nolan, who won it last year, talked about how Ridley Scott is probably his biggest influence. Christopher Nolan will probably be giving out the Best Director Oscar this year. I think there's at least a good chance. I actually don't remember if the previous year's director gives out this year's director Oscar. Either way, Scott has never won one. Scott is 85 or 86. This could well become the narrative of this is his time, and we've long surpassed needing to give him an Academy Award. So that's where I'm noticing with Scott. That's my bold prediction. I think Scott will get in. I'm predicting him to be one of my 5. And at this moment, Sunday, September 29th, 9:17 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Ridley Scott will not only get a nomination for Gladiator II, Ridley Scott will win Best Director for Gladiator Part 2. Number 10, Pedro Almovar, The Room Next Door. The big but with this movie is this is his first English language film. What if this movie just kind of lost in translation? Just something doesn't fully connect. Maybe you can admire it and there's brilliance in it, but the language barrier, there's something lost between the two languages. I think that's a fear for this movie. Next one, this next category, I call it spoiler season. 3 directors I put in here, all who could end up upsetting. Maybe names that we weren't necessarily thinking of, but there's reason to believe in them, and they could really sneak into the top 5. Spoiler season number 9, I have Ramel Ross, Nickel Boys. Don't know much about the movie. Everything I hear about Nickel Boys is not only that it is really creative and brilliant, at least that's what I've been hearing from a lot of critics, is this movie's really good. But the direction is specifically the standout part of it. It feels different. It feels unique. It feels of its own vision. Those are all things that I like when talking about director. They're all noticeable. Number 8, Mohamed Rasalouf, The Seed of a Sacred Fig. Neon has a history of championing an international feature film and getting it a lot of Oscar nominations. I wrote down a few. We had Parasite, which obviously went on to win big. We had the film Folie, which got nominations in animated, documentary, and international. We had Triangle of Sadness in 2022. And we had Anatomy of a Fall last year. All international features, all picked up by Neon, all got nominations for big categories. I don't see why there's not a possibility for The Seed of a Sacred Fig getting in this year. The Seed of a Sacred Fig, I think there's a lot working in its favor, and it has Neon Studios behind it who have been good at championing films like this. Number 7, I have Malcolm Washington for The Piano Lesson. I've been on this theory. What if Denzel Washington gets a nomination for Gladiator II? What if John David Washington could sneak in for Best Actor for The Piano Lesson? You'd have the Washington trio all there. They'd be campaigning together on the trail. There'd be so much just positivity towards them. It'd be a counter course to the discourse of Nepo babies in Hollywood. To me, there's a lot working in these guys' favors, which is essentially they all are kind of helping each other, and it's a celebration of the Washingtons who are continuing to prove they're one of the best celebrity/actor families out there. And if they're all combating the campaign together, I just think it's one of those things where they could just all raise each other's stock. And how special of a moment would it be there if you have Denzel, Malcolm, John David, all next to each other. You can cut the camera to them. I think there is reason to believe that there's a narrative that could form with The Piano Lesson in that way that gets Malcolm Washington and John David Washington surprise noms. Maybe not even surprise, just noms. we have 6 names left. I always find it more fascinating to talk about the ones that everyone kind of feels like are locks, the ones we all kind of seemingly agree on. So I have 3. I always call this category or something along the lines of Tux already fitted. People who it would be crazy if they didn't get the nomination. Number 3, I have Jacques Audiard for Emilia Perez. Netflix release, one of the buzziest movies of this year's film festivals thus far. I think there is a backlash brewing based on social media reactions that I'm starting to see of this film. I think that is coming. It just doesn't feel like he's going to be denied. It feels like Emilia Perez is definitely going to be one of the 10, and it just feels like this movie is going to get a ton of nominations. Number 2, Brady Corbet. Brady Corbet? Brady Corbet. Brady for The Brutalist. Can't say I know much about this movie except that everyone's talking about it like it's the second coming. Incredible critical acclaim. 3.5-hour movie. Masterpiece is what I'm being heard. The American story told through The Brutalist. All things that I like to hear. It feels like The Brutalist is now a big contender. Number 1, Sean Baker, Anora. The buzziest film of this year. The one we all know is going to get a nomination. Anora is probably the safest movie to, yes, is going to get 10 to 12 nominations. This movie is seemingly beloved. There is a lot of goodwill towards this movie. It's safe to say that it's going to be in there. That doesn't mean Sean Baker wins for Anora. I just think it does mean that Anora is not going to get denied in Best Director for a nomination. Leaves 3 directors. I call this category, is Dune doomed again? Because obviously we haven't talked about the Dune of it all. So currently, notice, 4 people I've already locked in. Audiard for Emilia Perez, Corbet for The Brutalist, Sean Baker for Anora, and then I'm putting Ridley Scott in there for Gladiator II. That leaves 1 spot. And the 3 people here are Steve McQueen for Blitz, Edward Berger for Conclave, Denis Villeneuve for Dune Part 2. Denis Villeneuve. He should get this spot. And I'm pretty lukewarm on Dune Part 2. I didn't think it was that good. And I actually had a lot of issues with Denis' direction. However, Dune Part 2 is going to get a lot of nominations like the first film did. And if that's the case, I don't understand how you can deny Denis a second time after the backlash was so big the first time of, how isn't he in for Dune Part 1? Steve McQueen for Blitz. Trailer came out. Trailer looked fine. Don't know what else to say except the fact that I was a little underwhelmed with the trailer. But Steve McQueen is a good director. Steve McQueen is actually a great director. War movie, a lot working in this film's favor. I just need to see it. I'm still not buying in on this movie until I see it. I think it also has a PG-13 rating, but maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. Something's not sitting well with Blitz, and maybe it's just because it hasn't been premiered as wide for a film that feels like it should be premiering. But again, maybe Apple knows what they're doing. Or maybe this is the case of Napoleon like last year. I don't know. Edward Berger, Conclave. The more I hear about this movie, the less I'm convinced it's going to be as popular with the Academy Awards as maybe people were expecting. This movie sounds a little bit more silly and a little bit more fun, and telling also a satire of the American electoral system. Sounds like a ton of fun. Sounds like a movie that I'd be really into. But this one could be one where I see a lot of actor nominations, maybe a screenplay. I'm a little concerned about the director. Not concerned, because obviously I don't know the quality of this movie yet, but I think people may be overrating Berger at this moment. All Quiet on the Western Front is a visual achievement. It is a physical movie, and it's hard not to feel. A movie that works as a satire, not necessarily a movie that is as noticeable and as flashy, especially when your main contender is Dune Part 2. I think this is the question. Do you think Dune Part 2 is going to get in? If you think Dune Part 2 is going to get in, I think it is fair to assume that something like Conclave misses the 5. Now, obviously, again, Ridley Scott, that's the random wild card that I have in there. But if we are believing Emilia Perez, Brutalist, and Anora are going to be in there, is there room for Dune Part 2, Conclave, Blitz? Like, which one is getting cut of this group? Because you're saying that 2 out of these 3 will get cut. Or 2 of these 3 will get in. I would personally believe, and again, this is me saying I think Ridley Scott is getting 1. I think it would go Denis Villeneuve for Dune Part 2. I think he's the 4th nomination. And that means Ridley Scott's the 5th. That ends it. If Scott misses it completely between McQueen or Berger, I don't know. I almost want to give the pedigree to Steve McQueen for Blitz. War movie. War movies typically do really well with the Oscars. It's a very, again, as I just described, All Quiet, can be a very physical and harrowing experience. And Steve McQueen is certainly a director who understands how to do harrowing and the cruelty of the world juxtaposed with also the beauty of a story about a mother trying to reunite with her son during the bombing of, I believe it's Britain. Like, there is a lot to believe here. So my logic is Emilia Perez, Brutalist, Anora. Those are kind of the indie hits. You're going to get 2 big budget films. And I'm saying Dune Part 2 feels sure. And it's your now choice between Gladiator 2 and Blitz. I'm personally saying Gladiator 2. Other people may go Blitz. Maybe someone else will just do Conclave or something else like that. I don't know. Those are my 5, though. Sean Baker for Anora, Brady Corbet for The Brutalist, Jacques Audiard for Emilia Perez, Denis Villeneuve for Dune Part 2, and Ridley Scott winning for Gladiator